Hey friends, inventory management can be a major pain. Keeping track of all your ingredients, your inventory across warehouses and co-mans, your retail and e-com orders, and tying all of that together. When your Excel spreadsheet breaks, check out our friends at Sin7 Core, our inventory management software partner. You can track everything you make and sell, and as the leading tool for early CPG brands, it integrates with all the major software like QuickBooks, Shopify, Amazon, and whatever your warehouse and co-mans are using. Through Startup CPG, you get a free month trial and then 50% off the 3 months after that. To get started, check out sin7.com/startupcpg. That's Sin, C-I-N, like the first 3 letters in Cincinnati, and the number 7. So sin7.com/startupcpg.
You have to be able to just embrace rejection, which I think is a theme of life in general. But with Hop Water, I like working in these brands that are sort of new categories and really truly innovative products. And part of the game is like, you're going to get laughed at a lot, especially in the early days before the concept has been proven. And you can't let, one kind of mean person ruin the rest of your day and your show and cut down your confidence. So, and like I said, a lot of those people will come back around 2 years down the road, maybe even a year down the road, and end up really liking the product and understanding it.
CPGers, make sure that your pen has enough ink because you're going to want to take notes during this whole episode. Samuel Jacobson from Hop Water, another one of my sales heroes, is on the podcast today to just ooze knowledge from years of doing distributor shows. It's how to choose and plan for the show, figure out what deals you're going to offer, and, once you're on the floor, how to really rip. These are my favorite kinds of episodes where I'm so certain that you all are going to just grow your brains over the next hour by learning from somebody who I think is one of the best out there. Thank you so much to Samuel for giving his time on this episode. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. We are very lucky to be joined today by Samuel Jacobson, my friend, currently the Senior Director of Key Accounts and Alternate Channels at Hop Water, a very high-growth sparkling water brand and the leading hop water. He's managed distributor, broker, retail relationships, and so much more for Hop Water since 2021, which is when the brand expanded out of D2C. Currently, he leads the natural channel through UNFI and KeHE and also on-premise, food service, and third-party e-commerce. Before Hop Water, he was with Seedlip, the first non-alc spirit that was acquired by Diageo in 2019 that set off the non-alc craze that you see with all the brands that have launched since then. Samuel also had managed wholesale actually in the UK before launching Seedlip into Diageo's distributor network in the US. He is a University of Texas Austin grad, and he had actually spent several years touring in rock bands, which is my dream. And he also had played South by Southwest. So when he's not selling water, you can find him skiing or at a music festival. I plan to join him for that hopefully soon. And let's get it going. Samuel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Daniel. And I hope it's okay if I drink a little water on the pod. This is our new 16-ounce SKU we just launched. So,
oh, that's amazing.
No, really,
okay, wait, give us a little ASMR. Like, take a slow sip and let's hear it.
So label out, of course. That's yeah. These have been a hit. We just started rolling these out into retail, so we're really excited. But no, Daniel, I know we've known each other for a few years now. When I first moved to LA, I came to a ton of your Startup CPG events. I've learned just a ton from the Slack channel and the amazing community you've built. So it means a lot to be on here, and I appreciate you asking me to join.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember the first time I met you was at a Naturally event here in LA. And I just saw you talking to people about the brand and saw your vibe. And I think after about 5 seconds, I was like, hey, can I hire you? Like, can I poach you from wherever you are? And I didn't really know about Hop Water at that point. I definitely didn't know Jordan, who I now consider a friend. And I was just like, hey, can I steal you right away? And you're like, yeah, maybe not. Like, it's going pretty well, but
Yeah.
thank you. And then, so yeah, I was excited to get to know you, but I loved your vibe, like so down to earth and cool. And I could just see somebody that people would love talking to. And obviously, your shit also, which is the most important thing. And then, after that, we just kind of kept running into each other. And I think the next time we really chatted was at a UNFI distributor show in Las Vegas. And, what happened in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas on this podcast, but we're just talking about distributor shows. So nothing racy. Basically, the coolest thing was I was talking to somebody on your team who I knew, and it was my first time at a UNFI show. And I was just asking her for tips. And she's like, who you need to talk to is Samuel. This guy is a killer. Like, watch how, like, he'll talk to somebody and then before they know it, they're like walking out of there with a couple pallet order that they didn't even realize that they needed to do with him. And so then, I chatted with you about it and you were giving me tips on like, hey, first of all, you don't even need to like wait for the selling window. You can submit turnover forms to UNFI. So you taught me how to do that. That was a game changer. And then also just kind of learning like how to negotiate in the moment with people really effectively. And so, man, I have sales heroes in this life I'm really excited to learn from. You're definitely one of them. And I know you are the right guy to talk about this topic. So thank you for making the time. And guys, get your notepads out. This is going to be a doozy. I'm telling you, this is going to be just like nugget after nugget. And we might even talk about Nugget the retailer, who's always at these shows also. And you need to know how to negotiate with them, especially.
Yeah, you got to be ready for Saj to come by, for sure.
That's the funniest part.
Nugget.
Yeah, that's the funniest part of the show is when the Nugget horde comes by. It's like they're like in a pack and they protect the king. He's like in there in the middle. You're like, could I say hi to him? And they're like, they have like a bouncer and they're like, I don't know if you can talk to him.
A lot of them roll in entourages,
I know.
They roll deep from booth to booth. I'm really excited to jump into it and appreciate the kind words, Daniel.
Absolutely. So just to get into this one then, let's do an overview, because when I started, I didn't know what distributor shows were. I didn't know, is this like an expo, or if I haven't been, like, what should I expect out of this? So can you just, in your words, give us an overview of like, what is a distributor show versus something like Expo West that people might have a better grasp of?
Right. Yeah. And I definitely wanted to touch on this because you guys released a really valuable episode gearing up for Expo West this year, where you talked to a few veterans. And that was really informative. I recommend anyone who's doing one of those larger shows, go back and take a listen to that. They had some really good advice. But there is a pretty big distinction between a selling show and sort of, your big Expo West, where it's everyone from the industry, ingredient suppliers, packaging suppliers, investors, partners. The UNFI and KeHE selling shows are kind of a different experience because it's mostly vendors and buyers. And Daniel, yeah, that's right. That's where we connected on the show floor.
Vendors meaning us, but like brands, by the way, like UNFI vendors, not like service provider agencies, because they're actually not there.
Yeah. Brands, you might say.
Right. It is interesting that like it's a show where Expo West is just crawling with marketing agencies and packaging materials. You're just like, okay, I'm trying to like sell to a buyer right now. But actually they aren't allowed into the UNFI and KeHE shows. And even me, like as media, they don't really let in either. I want to be there. I can't get in. They just like, there's just business happening.
Right. So, yeah. So and also buyers are in a different state of mind and have a different agenda as well. I think Expo is a lot about discovery, and sort of getting the lay of the land. And at these shows, it's really, they're ready to buy. They're looking for deals, and they're moving pretty aggressively. Obviously, it depends on the buying team, how the sense of urgency they have around that, and which categories they're looking at, how quickly they move. But yeah, it's a place for business to happen for sure.
Actually, on that note, I remember at a KeHE show, one of the Texas retailers came up to me and he was like, "Hey, did anyone from my team get to you yet?" I was like, "Oh, no." He's like, "Okay, I want to take like 5 pallet order at 30%. That's just what we're
Right.
doing. 30%. We have a competition on my team for who can get the most, orders done right now. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
okay. Like, we were okay with that level of discount. Like, okay, great. Like, yeah, you win. Great.
They got the notepad out. Yeah, and they sometimes take the lead there as well. Whereas like Expo, everybody's sort of give me your pitch, and sometimes those buyers will come with their UNFI or KeHE account managers and they're ready to roll. This is what we want. Can you meet that? If not, we're moving on. Yeah.
Not to say like every brand should expect to go in there and sell their lifetime
Oh yeah.
record of stuff, right?
Yeah, I want to be clear. And I think that's a good place to start is like, when I started with Hop Water, I had done during my time with Seedlip, I actually did a couple of shows over there. Obviously, totally different landscape in the UK. But when I started taking over the natural channel with Hop Water, I didn't really know what I was getting into with some of these selling shows. And the first one or two, it was definitely a learning process. So I'm hoping that some of the learnings that I sort of fumbled through over the past 3 years, might be helpful to somebody going to their first show. But yeah, I mean, the other piece here that I think will come up a few times is that, when you're in a mature state of the brand, there's a lot more opportunity for volume at these shows. And that becomes the focus. So that's definitely where we're at with Hop Water today. But definitely initially, getting some placements and starting conversations is a win, right? And I've seen accounts that we met, literally 3 years ago come back around, and now it's paying off. And we've sort of nursed that relationship over the years, and they saw us then, and maybe even they laughed and sort of smirked at us then, like what even is a Hop Water before it was recognized, as its own category by the data companies, and finally it's coming around. So that's the other piece is like, don't be discouraged, anyone who's at their first show and sort of figuring it out. I think that's a great point, Daniel, that there's still a lot of value, even if you're not closing, huge orders.
Okay, so tell me if you like this analogy. Based off what you just said, it's almost like Expo West might be the Erewhon discovery, figuring out, learning about new brands, and then UNFI and KeHE shows are like the Costco,
Right.
where it's like, oh, if they know, you see a brand that you're going in and you're taking volume, you're getting
Right.
deals.
Yeah. I think that makes sense to me. It's yeah, but the discovery piece I think happens at these shows for earlier stage brands as well. That is to say that buyers are relatively risk averse, and so you'll find one or two that are going to take a bet on you if they really like the product and the vision, and that's sort of your crowbar into getting some data points to prove the brand out. But I would say don't be discouraged if like that first show with UNFI or KeHE, like you're not walking away. If you break even on that first show, like that's a win.
Yeah, so let's talk about that because obviously you have to pay money for the booths at these shows. I forget the exact amount, but I don't know, maybe it's like
it's creeping up every year
or something just for the booth, right?
It varies. It's between $5,000 and $10,000, I think.
Okay, and then on top of that, you need to budget for this thing. So $5,000 to $10,000 for the booth plus your flight there and your hotels. And I don't know, they always, if they're like in Chicago, the hotels are always, I don't know, like really
Chicago
sold out.
Hotels are crazy.
At that point, if anyone needs like a cheap hotel option, I found a really good one, a lovely Chinese hotel chain that's not too far away. It was like $100 a night. It was perfect. Nice. I saw a lot of our friends there. Me and Jake from Phila Manila were chilling there, with enjoying our nice like 1/3 pricing. And then but then you have product costs also, right? So shipping a pallet of Hop Water there, right? I mean, that's going to cost I don't know, maybe $1,000 or more, right? In terms of the product cost plus the shipping, and then they have to receive it. They charge you a little bit for that.
I think there are definitely ways in the early days. I mean, we're still super scrappy. So, we'll call the hotel and try to ship stuff to the hotel and take, a small fee for them to store it. If we have a broker or a salesperson, somebody from the team in the area will ship to their house and they'll drive it in to the
Mhm.
show because there are the fees associated with shipping to the service provider at the convention center can really creep up on you.
They're wild. Oh, no, I mean, not just
Yeah,
creep up, they'll hit you in the face with a
yeah. So
sledgehammer.
if you can avoid it, finding alternate ways of getting your product and your booth assets into the venue is definitely the way that we've done it. There's also ways of saving like on the booth. So you can do like a shared booth, which if it's like, you're just starting out at these shows, that's a good way to not like overinvest and still be there and get a sense of the show. And once you move on, I think getting the full booth, like you kind of want some room to move around. You also, I would say even in the early days, it's great to have more than one person if you can afford it and if you have um, the team availability because one, there's a lot going on. So having multiple people to have a second conversation or to do, I know we're going to talk about sort of loading orders and different strategies for like taking down orders. Sometimes you'll be using the iPad. It takes a while to get used to that. So having two people minimum, I think is a good way to go. So then it's nice to have the larger booth space just to move around. But yeah, there are ways to sort of cut down costs if that's helpful at all.
Yeah, and then I remember when I went to UNFI Vegas, I drove there from LA and just I think we now I have a bigger car, but at the time we just rented like a little van or whatever,
Right.
loaded everything up there. I think we ended up maybe using about 3 layers of product.
Okay.
So maybe not even that much, honestly, because it's not like Expo West where everyone's drinking and you can kind of control it. Like you'd probably be okay if you only had like 10, 20 cases of beverage at
That's
least.
usually we do. I mean, because you want some display product. You don't want all of your product in the ice. So you got to thread the needle for sure. I mean, it's definitely better to go a little heavier than lighter on the product front. You don't want to run out of product, but yeah, 15 cases generally you can get away with it. And these shows, they're not like Expo where it's 3 days. Generally, it's going to be 2 days. And sometimes even that second day is slightly shorter. So yeah, the time on the floor, you can kind of do the math. And it also depends how you're serving. So generally you're serving with beverage, like small, 1.5 ounce samples. But you're going to want to be able to give some cans away if people want to take those as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
kind of run the math and figure out where you land.
And speaking of being scrappy, like because I'm in the midst of fancy foods planning, and I see
Mhm.
some beverage companies like, oh, I guess we have to rent a fridge. For me, what I figured out is you buy a collapsible cooler off
Mm,
Amazon, send it to the hotel, and then every day I'd bring some garbage bags and take the ice from the hotel,
right.
go put your product in the cooler, fill it
We've
with ice.
definitely done that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then koozies. Honestly, for me, the best was just keep the cans in a collapsible cooler with ice, and then have koozies, and they'll stay nice and cold.
totally. Yeah, we recently brought in sort of barrel coolers for Expo, and we're rolling those out to these shows as well, which is great if you're sort of handing out cans.
Nice
Um,
pun, rolling them out. I get it,
oh
barrel
yeah, there you go,
coolers.
rolling
Thank
out,
you. Ding.
bada boom.
Oh,
But
and by the way, just about the half booths.
yeah,
Interesting that you brought that up because I had kind of forgot about that. I think, okay, the KeHE show that I went to, I don't think I saw a lot of them, at least in Chicago, but I know UNFI did see some of them. And then I think when they did the San Diego show, I saw it was like, oh, maybe they would have them, maybe they wouldn't. So maybe it's an
right,
option sometimes, but it sounds like, hey, like it's a good idea to see if that's an option. Like for me, I don't care about the booth, the size of it that I have. I just need
yeah,
to be at the show. So I'll take the lowest table stakes, right? Like get me there. I'm in the aisle, like doing my
yeah.
thing. Oh, I don't care what's behind me. Just like give me a place to post up, you know?
Totally. I think, yeah, it totally depends on the brand as well. Some people, I've never worked in sort of hot prepared items. Obviously, you need like some real estate to pull that off. And that's something that, logistically, um, you know, I don't envy those brands. They always do an amazing job making sure that that food comes out nice and fresh samples. It's a little easier with beverage. You just as long as they're cold, you're kind of good to go. So it's a simpler, streamlined thing. But I agree. That sort of we can touch also on like booth presentation, because that's evolved a lot for us as a brand over time.
Yeah, let's do it. Because I actually think that's one of the most important points. Just the little things like, is your hot food hot? If it's not hot, it tastes bad. And
Right.
like I've seen brands where I'm like, hey, like I've walked by and the drinks weren't cold. I'm like, I'm just because I'm your friend. I'm just telling you, like, chill it down. Like put
Yeah.
this, go swirl it around the ice, put it at the bottom of the sludge. It's tasting bad right now. You're making bad impressions. Like there, for me, I mean, I don't know if I'm a perfectionist, but I honestly think that this is the right way to be. The drink must be ice cold.
It's
Get it in
got
the
to be
koozie.
crisp.
Check it every once in a while. Like, don't be pouring warm samples and don't be serving cold food.
Right. If you have a dry spell for a bit, you can pull those samples and open fresh cans if you're pouring from them, for sure. And I think, people get carried away with visuals with booths, and it's kind of like it's something that's really exciting about our industry, is like the creativity that goes into presenting your brand in all of these different ways, and obviously the physical interaction can be really impactful. So um, to finally see, like, Poppy had a really cool activation at Expo this year, really interactive, cool space. They probably invested a lot into that. And that's great. It's a great part of the industry. I just don't think it should be a priority, especially for emerging brands. And at these shows, like, you want to clearly communicate what the product is, maybe a few lifestyle elements behind the brand. So it's not just, solution oriented. It's also the identity of the product. But beyond that, and that can be pull up banners. We actually just rolled out with a big backdrop, which is a big upgrade for us, just having like a clean sort of large scale backdrop that collapses. But in the early days, I mean, we had just like tablecloth, one stand up banner, and a branded cooler, and just stacks of product, and you get
Product is king, though.
don't
Yeah.
try to, the other thing I'd say is, like, I think when I first got out there, I was a little bit like, well, here we are, this like small brand, our first show, like, here's all these people with these double wide booths, and 10 people in there. But, from the buyer side, they like seeing you where you're at. You can really be yourself. And I think that speaks to, CPG in general. And it's something that I really like about, selling in this space, is that, you're rewarded for authenticity. So if you truly are a customer and a fan of the brand that you're working with, you should be yourself at the shows, because they're interacting with a lot of people, and they're not looking for a certain thing. They want to hear from you who you are and where you are, if that makes sense.
Yep. I just am thinking about the booth expenses. Excuse me, the booth expenses, and when it would make sense to start. Oh, you go for a bigger booth, but now you need a more expensive booth design and a place to keep the booth, and then more people to man the booth. Ooh, it's a slippery slope, right?
Right.
I'm just
Yeah.
such a fan of being scrappy. But I mean, yeah, you see the like Impossible booth at Expo. It's like a whole hot dog stand set
Or
up, and it's
you notice
massive.
after like a merger or something, suddenly things change as well. Like, it's like there's 50 people on the floor, they're in the main hall, and it's a whole game changer. But yeah, I would say don't get ahead of your skis, and retailers aren't judging you based on how flashy you are. They want to taste an amazing product and understand why it matters for their sets.
Yeah. I think if you asked all the like food tech companies that are now having tons of problems with like cash and profitability, like what are the things you should have pulled back the most? Probably like booth expenses, ridiculous, ornate booths would have been one of the first things.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that.
So, okay, great. And then just, yeah, speaking, like what's some other stuff about, booth floor? Like, yeah, I mean, okay, let's say like you're just there and you're trying to meet the right buyers. Like, what's your approach? Samuel just like teleported onto a trade show floor right now.
Right.
You're standing in front of your booth, and the traffic's coming at you. What are you actually doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think um, taking a step back and looking at sort of what this experience is like from the buyer side. These people are flown out on the distributor's dime to be there, and for some of them, you know these are generally somewhat desirable locations. You mentioned Las Vegas. There's a show in Orlando. I think some of these buyers like bringing their families out there to go to Disneyland or whatever. So, some of these buyers are coming in sort of like, they're like decompressed a little bit from their normal workday. They're happy to be outside of the office. And so, they're looking to have fun at some level. And I think, a mistake that I made probably in the first 30 minutes to an hour of the first show I was at was just being extremely serious. As a salesperson, I know, we're all under a lot of pressure, but you don't want to translate that pressure over to the buyer. So just being fun and happy and sort of gravitational of like, and there's kind of a momentum thing where like, if you bring some energy over to your booth, people will see that and it'll draw them over, so there's a level of inertia with like traffic at the booth that you can take advantage of sort of spinning up some traffic and helping that play into the next group of people. I would say, it's really important to know your marketing language that your brand team has put together and the way that the brand is communicated in a digital ad, for example. But the way that you grab somebody's attention on a show floor in 5 seconds might look different than what's on the marketing collateral. So, an example is with Hop Water. One thing I'll say a lot is like, asking somebody a question, actually, just saying like a question, the answer is yes to, like, do you like cracking a cold one? What are you asking me? At that point, all you need to do is just initiate the conversation and get their attention to have them walk over to the booth, at which point then you can talk through the product attributes and, why you're going to be an asset to their set.
That's cool. Who could say no to that? Like who could even not crack a smile and like just enjoy that entry?
Like, because people are just constantly like, and I think it's, one way I think about it as well is like, it's kind of like being at a bar and you're like striking up a conversation with somebody. You can't go up and be like, what's your credit score? And, mine is this. You got to sort of ease your way into the nuts and bolts.
Oh, no. Is that why I'm still single? Okay, I'll take that one off my pickup line list.
I don't know if we got an editor here. So I think that's an important thing. I think also like, you have to be able to just embrace rejection, which I think is, a theme of life in general. But with Hop Water, I like working in these brands that are sort of new categories and really truly innovative products. And part of the game is like, you're going to get laughed at a lot, especially in the early days before the concept has been proven. And you can't let, one, kind of mean person ruin the rest of your day and your show and cut down your confidence. So, and like I said, a lot of those people will come back around 2 years down the road, maybe even a year down the road and end up really liking the product and understanding it. So don't take anything personally and come in with like a firm grounding of where you're at. And if somebody doesn't like it, smile and like, well, thanks for the time trying it or hearing about it, and don't burn that bridge because they could come back around sooner rather than later.
We'll be right back. Did you know that Startup CPG has an official in-store demo partner? I'm really excited to announce our partnership with Grassroots Marketing. They are awesome for early brands. They have no minimum number of demos, they've got national coverage, and you get full reporting analytics. They work with the big guys like Whole Foods and Sprouts, but also the tastemakers like Central Market, Mother's Market, and they're actually the official demo partner for Erewhon. For the Startup CPG community, there's an introductory rate of $180 for a 3-hour demo for the first 3 months. That'll help you get started, and then their rate goes up to $200. Again, there's no minimum number of demos. That is a huge differentiator because some other agencies I've talked to want you to do an enormous number of demos for each store that you try, and a total number of demos that can just be way out of your budget range. It's really hard to find a good demo partner when you're a growing brand. Grassroots is a great one. If you'd like to chat with their team, email hello@grassrootsdemos.com and ask for the Startup CPG community discount, or connect with Bridget or David on our Slack channel or LinkedIn. And now back to the show. Yeah, that's a good point. And it's a long run in this industry, right? And yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine that when you're just starting out a brand, but you're going to see that same buyer the next year, and maybe they'll have actually heard of your brand that time, right? With like Hop Water, you guys started, it was kind of you were pioneering this new type of drink, new category, or, and then, fast forward today, like widely recognized as the leader in Hop Water and everything. People know it now. And, you're not gonna have to explain what it is as much. The conversation will start a little bit differently, probably for a lot of buyers. But also, like, there's a woman I'm a huge fan of, actually, that I was talking to at Expo West, and she had just had a buyer really give her a negative view on her products, and she came up and she was pretty upset about it, and just like it was going to ruin her day, like you're talking about. And I mean, I've had that happen to me, and it's a huge bummer, because you're like, oh my gosh, and now like that's a no from them, and I'm going to have to like restart my whole process with them. It's going to be another year. But but that's what I said to her. I was just like, what? It is an unlimited universe out there of potential retailers. Like, okay, go a different route. Do other people like it? Yes. Okay, go talk to them.
Exactly.
There's no product that 100% of people like, except maybe cold ones. I don't know.
It's so true. And it's also, the buyer might not like it, but their consumers might, their customers might. And so eventually they'll realize that, if it's really a great product. And I think, like the numbers game is huge, because, the US, we're fortunate to have a massive market that we can address. And, with UNFI and KeHE, this is unique with these distributors versus like a DST network. You sign one contract, you start working with UNFI and KeHE, and you can address the entire country. You just have to activate those DCs and get the product out there and get the demand. That's something else we could talk about, is the sort of chicken and the egg, ramping up demand and warehouse activations. And, it's a really tricky needle to thread, to sort of have enough demand to load the product in, and enough pull through to keep it there. But it's got to be there to actually make the sale. So it's a sweet spot of timing that's kind of tricky to hit in the early days of expanding a brand.
Yeah, and so for these, and this was a learning to me also, but when you're talking about UNFI Las Vegas, like who's going to go to that, you can kind of guess. Right. And then you can also understand which of the distributor centers that you need to be active in for that to make sense. So if you take KeHE Chicago, right? There are a couple KeHE DCs. Most of the people who go to that show are retailers who pull from those DCs. So it's going to be the Texas retailers for Chicago. It's going to be up to Michigan, basically. Like now, Central. Like, do you get a couple coming in from West Coast? Sure, yeah, because they just are interested to be there and see the brands and make buys and everything. But in general, okay, if you're considering which of these shows to go to, maybe you're in both UNFI and KeHE. What's your priority region? Where are you trying to get set up, right? And then you can try to go there and make a case for let me get 40 doors, and then I can get UNFI or KeHE to open that DC up for me if I have the orders ready to go, right?
Yeah, and that's a part of the value of these shows, I would say. I mean, in the early days, because some of these retailers are big enough that they can anchor even several DCs. Harris Teeter is a huge door count. Somebody like Big Y we connected with in the early days of our trade shows, and they helped us launch that DC over there on the East Coast. So, building the demand and sort of using the shows as a way to get these anchor points and then launch. And then, sure, you're going to miss out on some opportunity. You got to log that demand and follow up once it's open. But it's kind of it's a way, if you want to expand, if you want to expand onto the East Coast, hit the Orlando show and meet a lot of those retailers and set up those anchor points to get product out there.
And it'll you were talking about the role of the show is different depending on the maturity of the brand and what you're trying to accomplish. At least for me, when I went in the early days, the brand was not well known. I was trying to actually just build relationships with the big retailers. Like, I didn't really care if they came in and like I'm talking to an indie store and they want a free case from me and then they'll order 3. Like, that's really not what I'm there to do. I don't care about selling those cases. I care about the whales that are there, and I'm they're not going to give me a yes on the floor for the reset, but I actually did get a bunch of accounts that way with those, let's say Midwest retailers when they were there. That was just another really important in-person touch point, some of whom it was the first time I finally got them to actually stop and sample the product.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, then later, in the later stages, yeah, you might be just like, okay, if you take the KeHE Chicago show, that's a winter selling show, even though it's in the summer, but they're ordering for the winter. So like, they're there to buy a crap ton of chocolate, right? For their like displays. And if you're, Ferrero Rocher or whatever, if you're like Ferrero Rocher or whatever, you're there trying to just sell a truckload, right? And they're trying to get a deal on that truckload, right? So different roles. But I think good for people if they're looking at the landscape of all the shows out there, all the UNFI shows over the year, all the KeHE shows, any other distributor shows or local shows that you could consider as like, how does this tie into my overall strategy, our growth ambitions, how much money we have to spend on this stuff, what our distributor strategy, and maybe not even just the strategy, but the reality is today, right? And like also maybe not having the FOMO, like, okay, let's be realistic. This is not the year to do it, but next year might be. And yeah.
And I think you can ask, if you're lucky to have, a broker partner, you can get their insight about, because the shows, there's a certain amount of changeover year over year, with like, the locations and, word on the street of where most of the retailers are going to be and, where your priority targets are going to be. Another thing that's worth mentioning is there's some of the UNFI regions do smaller local tabletop shows. So one of these just happened in Anaheim. There's one in Sacramento coming up, and I believe these are invite from their side, but it's something to have on your radar and speak to your UNFI reps about making it into those shows, because there's a lower price barrier to entry. It's a little more intimate of a setting, and it's a good bridge to do a quick one-day show and build out some of that business.
Yeah, these are like double secret shows. I remember like our broker had no idea when these were happening. They couldn't get us into them. Our UNFI rep or they still were like, oh, I don't even really know who manages that or who does the invites. I don't know how this thing happens, but if you find the person who does make it happen, be their best friend.
9 3/4. You got it. It's I didn't know about them for, the first year and a half of doing this, and then started hearing these murmurs, and then we have a guy on our team who manages the Pacific Northwest. He's an absolute stud, Rich Castillo. He's in the business for a long time. And he did one of these in the Pacific Northwest, and it was just massive success. We're like, okay, we need to do these everywhere that they're happening. So yeah, I'm not, I'm by no means an expert on those, but worth asking your partners and keeping an ear out how to get involved in those as well.
Yeah. And then, another thing I want to touch on at the show, right? You've got the buyers, and we're talking about them a lot, but also actually the people who work for the distributor sometimes can even be more important, right? So like at the KeHE show, anyone who works for KeHE, I'm stopping them like, oh, hey, what accounts do you work on? And not even like they might be the buyer's best friend or like total, right-hand person who like, oh, let me go get the buyer for you. I like this product. Or, hey, send me samples and I will take it to the buyer. Sometimes buyers even are like looking to them to really recommend products to the assortment, right?
These are people who, there's a reason they work in natural foods. They love the space. So, connecting with UNFI and KeHE account managers or even other stakeholders within those organizations, they can really become champions of your brand. And they're talking a lot, internally within those organizations. They can really open doors. Obviously, your, supplier relationship manager or your category manager, they're critical people to build those relationships with. Your buying team, because they're going to navigate whether you can move to full pallet quantities at the right time. There's a lot of power that they hold, but we've had a good example good example is a guy named Brandon Bailey, who's in the Rocky Mountain region, and sort of really early on in Hop Water's life, he became a big brand advocate and just helped us unlock a ton of business there, based on his relationships and being an authentic fan of the brand. So 100%, I would say. And I think that extends as well, to a point that's discussed a lot when people talk about trade shows. And this came up in your discussion about Expo West. It's really important to, not be a total shark and only focus your attention and energy on who you know to be buyers of big chains. Really treat everyone with the same level of attention and respect. People transition roles a lot in this industry. Everyone is a consumer. Everyone chats, and it's just a good policy to have, I think. It takes a lot of energy to give that level of pitch over and over again, but it's really worth it. And yeah, some of those people could work on the distributor side. Could be somebody's spouse, that you see that sometimes. They bring their family to the show. You're like, who is this random person who's asking all these questions? They don't have a badge. And you find out pretty quickly. So I think that's really critical, is treating everybody with dignity.
Yeah, I like that. And even, like at the KeHE show, for example, I really wanted to get into some of their honors programs. Like they have one for the best in class brands that are mission based, and they have the Elevate program for early brands, stuff like that. Everyone who works there can influence that. Honestly, you meet people from like the business development team, the marketing team, the impact team. Like KeHE is a B Corp, and everyone who's there is like really cares, actually, is what I've found. Yeah. And if you talk to them about it, like, I think one of the best qualities of good leaders are people who can kind of make like spurious connections about things, like kind of just on the fly, like, oh, you do this. Oh, what if we did this together? Like, oh, could you like work on the impact side of the business? Like, could we talk about this with you? And like, you have such a big opportunity to just sit and do that at these shows. And they're kind of slow shows also. So you have the time to do it. And then, yeah, you don't know, they might run over and grab some big wig for you that, makes a big deal. So I really appreciate that perspective. You don't know who knows who. And also, I was going to mention also lastly, like you said about like being kind to everybody. I feel like in my life, almost every time I've just kind of like run out of energy and been a little, shitty to somebody, it's almost always come back to bite me in the ass.
Yeah. I mean, and I think, to be clear, I'm not speaking from a place of, perfection here. It's lessons learned. And I think the other corollary there is, the show doesn't end at the doors. So, there's social events that are planned by the distributors. Those are really critical. And you're still on stage at that point, and also in the elevator, in the parking lot, in moments of tension and stress, on the airplane going out there. I always see other people in the industry, whether it's on the brand side or brokers, on the same flights as me, coming from LA to some of these places. So just be aware of, the way that you're representing your brand every step of the way, I would say.
I love that point. That totally resonates. And like, I would say always be branded, always. Like, yeah, because on my flight from DC to, Vegas once, I just had my stuff with me, and the UNFI person who manages the Vitacost business was there. And she's like, oh yeah, I've been meaning to talk to you. Right. And that was amazing. And then we got in there. And I remember also there's a really wonderful woman who manages the Ralph's category for like the more natural set. Her name is Cassandra, and I was desperate to talk to her. And so I hadn't met her, and it was the end of the first day in Vegas. And then there was a nighttime event. It was cool. It was at like one of these like day party places, but it was a very nice nighttime event. And I just like walked around, and I was like really just looking to network in general. But then I like saw her kind of walk by, and then I basically, I hope she doesn't listen to this, but I walked over then kind of like, oh, it's a bit weird if I like, if I tried to corner her here, it's not going to go over well. But I basically just then went and stood in the line to get like some pierogies or something. And then she just happened to walk in right behind me. Right. I was like, oh, hey, like, what's up with these pierogies? Oh, hi, I'm Daniel. And then was able to talk to her. And then she was like so nice. And she's like, yeah, okay. Oh, I already passed through that section, but I'll come back by. tomorrow. And so that's like the nighttime stuff, like always being on. And I will say, I mean, I think a lot of people go there and try to have fun also at these events, kind of like you're talking about letting loose. But if you're on the brand side, I don't know, I've seen people get pretty drunk, and when you just like really make a bad impression, and also just not be on, there are big opportunities all around you at that point, and just, it's not the time to,
it's one of those needles again that you want to thread of, like, you want to have fun and be social, whatever that means for you and the choices you're making. But it is still a professional environment. So yeah, I mean, I think if I had gotten into this industry, maybe at a younger stage of life, I may have, had more learning moments there. I'm sure, but I was lucky to enter a little later in my 20s. But yeah, that's a great point. And another piece is, I love what you brought up about like swag, and I should probably be wearing some right now. But I think that's a fun part of our space is like, the sort of the brand affiliation, and people get really into it. And one thing I would say is like, I've seen there's a certain level of like over the top gimmicky stuff. Somebody's selling bananas, they run around in a banana suit, and like, you'll definitely get attention that way. But I think, just having simple branded stuff probably gets you most of the way there, and you sort of are able to still be taken seriously. So I would encourage people not to go for the just absolute insanity route on like, gimmicks in that way.
Yeah, you want to be like a company, not a gimmick, right? So that kind of makes sense to me. Oh, by the way, also to completely reverse what we were talking about earlier, I have seen pretty interesting stuff happen though when people are like, these buyers are going out, we need to go drink late into the night with them. Like, I actually have seen very strong friendships forged over that. So it's kind of like, okay, I don't know, maybe sometimes you do need to go and drink a lot with them. And then
I'm guilty of also like going home early just because, you get tired at these shows with flights and early mornings and stuff. And yeah, I mean, I think there's different styles to everything, and every buying team, every space is different, and definitely I have heard the same thing. There's certain people that like to stay out late, and that can be a place to do business as well. I mean, the business is based on relationships. So
yeah, however, they're going to build trust with people, right? I mean, people like, oh gosh, I would never tell somebody who like doesn't want to drink, hey, you need to go and drink and do this. But like, like whatever your strengths are, I don't know, I guess play to those. And if you have different modes that you can flip into, that can be good too. But also like,
I also connect with people in an authentic way. Yeah. However that is for you. Yeah.
I have a friend from business school who manages a commodities business in an Eastern European country. And I was there visiting him. And his business is one where he just is entertaining clients all the time. And he took me out and he's like, we're going drinking. It's like, oh, okay. And we went and he just like went to a really nice place and they just brought us a full bottle of vodka. He's like, all right, let's just start drinking. I'm like, okay, I've like never done anything quite like this. Right. And then what I noticed is every time he would pour 2 shots, he would pour a little bit less in his cup and he would put some Coca-Cola into it. And I'm like, what was that? He's like, oh, no, it's just a thing that I do. And then he would never finish it. And I'm like finishing mine. And then all of a sudden I'm kind of wasted and he's probably still got his wits about him. So, maybe if you're going to do that, also think about, switching off water and booze.
Is also, like I said, for some of these buyers, it does feel like a vacation, and, they're there to work, but, the pressure's on the brand side, I think. So like, don't get caught up too late and miss your booth in the morning, I think is important.
Absolutely. I'm always paranoid at these shows, like, because the buyers are not going to walk by your section twice. They're going to do it. Like the whole show, right, is like, I mean, it's the size of like one room at an expo, right? Like one big ballroom, and they're going to do one full lap, and it's not going to be 3,000 booths there. It's going to be 300, right? And when they miss your section, if you're not there when they're there, or you don't see them, or they don't see you, that's probably it, unless you see them at an event, right? So I'm paranoid. I'm like, I have my eyes out. Like, honestly, maybe too much.
There's buyers I've talked to who come in for the morning and go write all their orders and then dip, after the first day. So yeah, you got to be on, like every 10-minute block of time counts. Expo, it's a little bit like, yeah, there is that second chance sometimes of people are still, out, in on the floor and you could run into them. But yeah, the time goes quick.
The worst is when you're talking to a really important buyer and then another that you want but is maybe not quite as essential comes by and you're just like, oh,
Yeah.
I need them too. Oh,
And I think that brings to like, a few things I wanted to touch on that are just like critical in the like preparation stage and what you have at your booth. Like, I think there's the obvious stuff like business cards, sell sheets, marketing sheets to just like physically present everything that your team is doing as a brand. And sort of tell that story in a way that's interactive. So I usually have a binder with just laminate sheets that I update every show with like the latest and greatest from our marketing team. Shout out, we have an incredible team that is really good at event, every vertical and 360 marketing touch point, so we communicate all that at the show. But the other piece is, like I said, having multiple people. So if you're in that situation where there's a critical buyer, but you're talking to a critical buyer, like you can have your colleague sort of keep them warm and occupied, maybe sample them. And, even if that colleague isn't in a position to speak to the account or hasn't been a part of that conversation before, they can sort of connect with them socially and hold them at the booth until you have time to move over.
Yeah, what I would say also is if you're going solo and you need a little bit of help, probably if you drop a message in our Startup CPG Slack, like, hey, I have an extra badge. If you want to come help me out, then you can be in the show. You will be overwhelmed with people who are very eager to come and help you. And then I even at like Expo, I would always like that we did a program with the Wharton School of Business where we got a bunch of not interns, but people would volunteer because they want to come to the show and they would work your booth for a day. And they're smart and like great. And they'll just come and pour the samples and then you can be out there kind of saving your energy.
That's a great point. And then, I mean, for brands that are not quite ready to make the leap into the show, just getting out there at somebody else's booth and getting the lay of the land so that, because like I said, the first time I went in there, I was going in blind and I made a lot of mistakes that first time. So, just being at the show and getting the lay of the land can help a lot.
I love it. And then, so let's go just specifically onto like, okay, let's say you get the order from them. So, okay, typically you go into one of these shows and then the first time you'll start panicking is when they say, hey, you need to load your deal in by like next week. And the show is like 3 months away or something. And so, the way it works typically is for that KeHE show, that's a winter selling show, but it happens in June. And they'll say, load in whatever discount you want to be in effect. And the shipping window is like October. So you're saying, okay, I'm offering like a 20% deal or 30% deal, whatever you want to do. And it's going to count on orders that ship between, October to November. And that's what they're pulling into their stores to be ready for December, right? Like, is that generally right? Or?
Well, I think we should take it one by one, maybe talk about the structure with UNFI and then talk about KeHE because it's very confusing. And it took me a couple of years to get the hang of like the process. But with UNFI, you get an email that's sort of a cryptic email that says the tabletop Parenso show portal is open. So Parenso is a third-party company that manages trade show operations. So they contract with Parenso, just to be clear. If you're like, who is Parenso? I didn't sign up for this. So you make a login and you go on this show portal. And for UNFI, on that portal is where you're going to load your deal for that ship window. And as you mentioned, the ship window is a series of 3 months usually. And then the buyer is going to sort of choose where they want the product to land within that period. So you load in the deal across your line. You want to double check that all of your SKUs are represented there. And then you can actually edit like your virtual booth. Some of the business happens virtually. So you can upload photos, put a bio up there, make sure that presentation is correct. You load in your deal, and the language around that isn't just like load your deal in here. I think it says negotiation or something of that sort. And you put in the percentage and then you confirm it and then they confirm it and then you're good. So you want to do that really early because there is a deadline for getting that in with UNFI. So be aware of those emails and look out for them like a hawk. And then generally what we do, and you brought this up before, is, we'll match that show deal for that ship window for immediate turnover. So if we have an account, if we have product in the warehouse and we have an account that wants to go right away, why would we wait to unlock that account 3 months in the future? So we just did these shows in early February, right? Why do we want to wait until till May or June to load that product in? So you can do immediate turnover forms, which is just a simple form. You fill it out and send it to the turnover receipt email address. If you have questions on that, ask the Slack at Startup CPG, or maybe your broker will have some expertise. But that's a great way to get the business going and then capture those additional months of sales. Doesn't make any sense why not to. That being said, a lot of accounts are sort of planning very closely and looking into the future, and they're going to want to stick to that ship window. At UNFI, at both UNFI and KeHE, it's very standard now to have iPads on site. My recommendation is to go pick that up the night before the show starts, when you're registering for your badge and loading some stuff into the show, because those lines get gnarly on the morning of the show. And again, you don't want to get pulled away from your booth. So you'll get an iPad, and it takes a little bit of time. I would say fumble your way through figuring out how to load into that iPad and mark the quantities. And then there's room for negotiation there. So if you want to do tiered volume deals, you could say, hey, if you get 15 cases, you get this discount. If you get half pallet, you get this discount. If you get a full pallet, you get this discount. And then you can negotiate that on the show floor on the iPad as like an incremental percent off above the show deal that you loaded in months prior online.
Yeah, and it's good to like align with your team and maybe your CFO about like what you're gonna do going in, because it's gonna get like, you're gonna be in the moment and you're gonna not know exactly. So like, have your parameters. I know, and there are a lot of considerations, right? Because like, okay, you can decide your deal for each month. Like, okay, you need to do like, what's the deal that we'll offer for October and then November, or these different shipping periods. It can be all the same for one, or I, as an early brand, I didn't find that like the virtual booth did much. Like mainly what was happening is people were coming up, and so we could kind of get away with a lower blanket deal and then just saying what we would be willing to go up to. Yeah, like what you're talking about. Like, okay, so I had approval for, hey, if they're going to order like 10 to 20 cases, we can give them this kind of a discount. If we're talking full reset and this is the first order, it can be up to this amount. The worst was, by the way, the people who would come are like, oh, I'm an 8-store chain, so why don't you just give me a free fill for all 8 and then I'll see. We're like, no, man, that's ridiculous. Like, I'm just going to give you $500 worth of product because you're telling me maybe you'll think about it. Like,
you gotta have, because there's a lot of people who are just looking for free fills and just, that's 100% margin for them. Like, why wouldn't they? But there's no guarantee they're going to keep it. So it's nice to have some skin in the game. We usually go for a 50% initial fill, or I'll give somebody a free fill if they place another order along with that.
Yeah, that sounds like a really smart strategy.
I think, going in, really having a grasp, you're going to get grilled. Some of these older, buyer veterans, they kind of like putting young salespeople on the hot seat. And so they'll just kind of grill you on pricing, and they'll move really quickly, and then they'll negotiate a deal with you pretty aggressively. And, obviously you want the placements, you want to walk away with new business, but like you said, you have to make sure that stays within, your trade spend guidelines. So go in sort of knowing your guardrails and knowing your pricing, front to back, so that you can quickly communicate and negotiate on the floor.
And good for just everyone to know, probably most people do, but when you're talking about something like an off invoice, like if you're talking about 20, 30%, that's not off like the price that you sell your case to KeHE or UNFI. It's actually calculated off the price that they're like selling, which includes their margin. So if it's a percentage, like, that's a bigger number. And then also, like, just be aware that you're not double dipping, right? Because you might have an off invoice period with them scheduled, right? Which are these like, 3 or 4 times a year. They might be asking you to give like a 15% discount, right? So like, if you're not careful, you might double dip on that. So you need to just make sure like, okay, I'm going to offer a maximum of 20% deal. And by the way, October is when I have that 15% off invoice. So it'll be that plus 5 for that period.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, what's great about the ship windows and the sort of official show deals that you load is they'll automatically roll that OI into the total. So they'll back the OI out of the total. So if you do a deal on the iPad for 30% and you have an off invoice running in July for 15, they're going to take account of the off invoice and give a total of 30.
Yeah.
So that'll happen automatically in the iPad. But if you submit a turnover and submit 30% and you have an off invoice going, it could actually double dip. So yeah, it's definitely something to be careful about. And I would recommend, when I just with the terms off invoice and manufacturer chargeback MCB, there's a few, if you just do some Googling, there's some documents that'll give you a rundown and you can get a grounding because it's very confusing, the whole system at first. We generally have like 4 off invoice OIs a year, and then we'll layer deals on top of that. So there are various strategies you can take. One note I wanted to make is with KeHE, it's slightly different than UNFI in that, your off invoice periods will be taken as sort of, broad deals available to any customer during the ship window if you have those loaded in. So if you want a deal available to all customers, you kind of have to load an off invoice, with the exception of show only deals through KeHE, which I think is another invite program. I'm not positive. And those have a minimum of 25, I believe, 25%. And so you can load a show only deal, which operates kind of like the base deal online in the UNFI portal. And then again, you can do negotiation on the floor. So just wanted to highlight there's a difference in the deal structures between UNFI and KeHE, and you have to make sure, there have been a couple of times we're at a KeHE show and I'm like, what the heck? Did I forget to load a deal in? No, that's just like not a part of the thing. We weren't invited to do a show only deal. So we only have ROI, and then we can negotiate deals on the floor.
We'll be right back. Hey, listeners, we all know how important it is to get dedicated face time with retail buyers. And now when you upgrade to a RangeMeet Pro subscription, you get 3 in-person buyer meetings at an ECRM session. That's right, 3 20-minute private meetings with buyers in your category. Tell them your story, sample your products, and have a distraction-free conversation. And a pro tip, our Startup CPG community discount is the best deal around on RangeMeet. You can get RangeMeet Pro with the 3 meetings for $11.99. That's more than half off the regular annual rate. RangeMeet Pro subscribers also get unlimited product listings, a dedicated customer success manager, VIP access to limited time campaigns, exclusive ongoing submission opportunities, and insights into which retailers are checking out your brand and products. To learn more, visit rangeme.com/startupcpg. And now back to the show. Very good point. And also, I kind of like, speaking of invite only or other programs that are available. Mm-hmm. So the first email you're going to get is going to be to load in that deal. The second one you're going to get is, hey, by the way, we have a bunch of marketing options for you to accelerate your impact at the show. Wouldn't you like to consider it? And they will send you a full library catalog of all of the different options that you could select, right? And it's similar to like Expo. If you see all the sponsorship stuff that happens there, like, do you want to sponsor the bathrooms or the staircase? And so I don't know, at least I'd be interested to hear your perspective. For me, I would look through that whole thing and a lot of them would just seem like, yeah, maybe this is kind of an expense I probably would regret. The one that I actually went for that I thought was a really good deal was for the KeHE show. There was one option where you could send a dedicated email to everybody who was attending. And I think it was like $3,000 or I don't know, maybe it was up to 5. I don't really remember the exact number. I think it was 3,000. And they would only do 4 of them total. So I was like, yes, I want it. Can I pick the exact time it should go out? Okay, I want this to go out at the beginning of the day before the show. Right. And it would like pick that prime slot. And with just a hit like marketing message. And it was so cool because everybody who came by our booth was like, oh, like, hey, I saw your email. You guys are like sponsoring the whole show, right? It worked. And like this, because of the timing of the email, because it was the first one to go out, then it was actually like had a really outsized impact and everybody saw it.
don't be surprised if that slot is not available the next time. That sounds like a
I
great
know. Well, fortunately, I'm not at a brand anymore, so I can give away all of my
You give away all the
learnings and
secrets. Yeah.
secrets, right?
No, I mean, that sounds super effective. I think as a rule of thumb, and look, like love working with UNFI and KeHE. We support them with the show fee, and we want to sell a lot of product together. So just want to make that clear. But yeah, I think generally you got to be really careful about return on investment for any sort of awareness marketing plays. Think really hard about how it's going to impact the sales, because what we found, I think, is that putting that money towards deals is going to result in better results.
Yeah, then floor stickers and do you want to be the lunch sponsor?
Right,
Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I'm not a marketing pro, but to me, that stuff seems like, hey, if you like that one, I also have like a bridge in Brooklyn to sell
Right,
you.
exactly.
So,
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
like,
It's
I
a
know, yeah, they
slippery,
need to cover their costs and
it's a
make sure
slippery
that.
slope. Suddenly you're like on the branded socks that like the whole KeHE team is wearing, or like yeah,
By
I
the
would,
way, all of our startup CPG sponsors out there, we love you. Please keep,
yeah.
working with us for awareness.
No, and I think you got to parse through, because like we do a lot of like that on platform marketing with some of our third party e-commerce partners, and like it's really effective in that context. There's a lot of intent to purchase, so you got to think about your audience and where they're making those decisions. What I find is funneling that investment into the deals is where we're going to get results. But I think also one note I was going to make. So we talked about turnover forms at the booth. I think going into the show with not just a deal structure, but actually a program is a really strong idea. So, we have a really exciting summer program we're running. We call it Aloha Summer. It's branded Yetis. So these beautiful branded blue Yetis with hop water. And we actually sell those in as a dealer loader. So I'll have one of those at the show on display. And then if a buyer brings in, 45 cases of product, we'll offer them the Yeti as a dealer loader to go with the display.
What does that mean, dealer loader?
It's the term for like an asset, a branded bike. You walk into a Ralph's, there's like a, branded snowboard or a bike, or, it's like if you buy a certain volume threshold, you get this asset, which goes on the floor as a part of the display. And after the display is over, it belongs to the account. So maybe that's a raffle for the staff. Maybe the manager falls in love and they take it home. So it's just a little extra to get somebody to that volume threshold. And then we pair that with sort of QR giveaways. So that we find like those kinds of programs are really successful, because then, it's really a talking point, and retailers are trying to make the shopping experience exciting and bring people into their stores and bring the brand to life. So if you think about, it's hard to communicate the lifestyle elements of a consumer product in a retail store. It's easier over social media or digital ads, but doing some sort of brand aligned, display and selling the deal at the show with that, I think could be something really great to look towards.
So speaking of negotiating, because I suspect you're a total pro on this, of, like you need to know your numbers and what your thresholds are. But like invariably, somebody's going to try to push you for more and you're going to be tempted to go for it. Like, how do you actually handle those kind of things in negotiations when they're like, look, it just has to be a number that's outside of your guidelines. And, you're a sales guy, you got targets to hit. And you also, you're not going to do something you don't believe in, but like, they might be like, oh, this is a little outside the guidelines, but I think we should go for it. Like, how are you handling those negotiations in the moment with somebody who you want to do business with, you want to respect you, and even if it doesn't get done, you want them to bring in your product later or something? Like, yeah, how does that work for you?
I think there's a few ways. So I think actually, you don't have time to run a calculation on the show floor of like, what's the 24-month return on this investment, right? So you have to have done some of those calculations for other accounts in the past, and you get a sort of like benchmark of like, for this level of door count with this ask, I've seen this before and I've seen it make sense, sort of thing. So I think that helps is having done the calculations and not know exactly, but have a sense of reference. I think there's other variables that you can use. So oftentimes, if somebody's really pushing, um, the percent threshold that we're generally comfortable with, let's say somebody's, asking for 35, 40%, something that's just really aggressive, we're going to have to get a lot in return. So sometimes what we're saving on is slotting fees, advertising fees, display fees. So, if you're working with an account where they're going to give you, displays, they're going to load in your new SKUs, you're going to get for us, cold box placement is really important. So if we don't have those in the grab and go cooler, maybe we roll that into the deal. And then like the volume that they're taking in, that plays a part as well. So, you sort of work different elements. I think, look, the honest answer to a lot of these things is you're responsible to be a steward of the business, and you're accountable to your leadership. So when you're negotiating with somebody on the floor, you can remind them of that like, look, I have these guidelines, like there's a certain wall that like I just can't say yes to you, but let's work together to make this work. I think
I like that strategy, like get them on your team. That's a good
yeah.
one. Yeah. And
On,
I also, yeah, what was one year we brought the CFO with us, and then it's like, okay, good. Like, yeah, you gave me these guidelines, but also like, I want you to know what it's like to be here in the moment, almost like you're at like a Tony Robbins presentation, is like, feel the momentum and the excitement. Like, okay, now you see, and they're like, yeah, maybe just do it. I don't know. So, like you and I, like sales guys, it's like good to get some empathy, but then good to walk through their models with them and really see the stark reality of the payback periods.
right. And look,
and then,
I mean, the other thing I'll say is, we're aggressive. When you're a young brand, like you have to be responsible with spin, but like if it's in service of opening up a bunch of doors that you have confidence the product will work in, like sometimes it makes sense to take a bit of a hit on the front end to open that up and have it run for the following years. So, you got to be strategic with it. And yeah, you're going to have people try to take advantage of you and talk fast and get super aggressive. So definitely come in prepared, and don't just always say yes, for sure.
Yeah, I've actually kind of found that it worked. I think I only had the confidence to do this later on in my journey, but let's say there's one of these like East Coast retailers that wants, 5 cases per store slotting. And I found it kind of disarming for them and also effective if I was like, hey, look, can you just be straight up with me? What's the least amount that I can give you to get this thing done? I would love to work with you. That's like a non-starter, but I really want to make it work, and I can't do that. So please, can you just tell me? And then, we can try to reinvest it into promotions or something. And actually, like in one instance, that got us down from 5 to then 2. And he was like, maybe even 1 if you do this other thing. Right. And if I hadn't asked that question, we could have been out $100,000 or something.
Also, reminding of all the other ways that you're investing. So if you're running demo programs, like those can be attached to a lot of spend, and like, that's for the partnership. If you're running digital ads in that region, if you have other assets that you can offer them, maybe you have a, celebrity ambassador, you can have them do a secret TikTok shop, that drives consumers into their doors. So think about ways you can add value beyond just straight dollars. But I totally agree that most things are negotiable. You just have to be careful with your leverage and how invested they are in the product, because you also don't want to insult anyone and have them walk away from a deal because you're pushing too hard to bring the cost down.
Yeah. Okay. And so just to kind of close out here, let's say, if they are kind of interested, for me, my biggest pet peeve is like salespeople who just will give a buyer their business card. Like, great, okay, you want this? Great, contact me. They never do. If you just hand them your business card and maybe a sell sheet, they're never going to reach out to you. They do not let them walk away without you having their contact info. And often they don't really like it if you ask for their business card. Maybe they don't have a lot, or they don't want to give it to you, or they may not have brought any. But I honestly never had an issue just saying, oh, could I write down your email? And I would write all of them down in my iPhone notes app. And then I also could then just quickly make a note about what I was going to follow up with them about. And then after on the plane home, I've got my whole to-do list, knock it out,
Yeah.
follow up on everything I'm supposed to follow up on, have my whole list of leads that I can then talk to the business owner, like, hey, look, here's all the stuff that I got. And then, otherwise, man, that stuff disappears.
As well, it was a great point you had in that previous podcast, which was on the plane. I'll do this as well. Do recaps on the plane. What else are you going to do? And you'll schedule the emails to go out, midway through the following week, so they have time to catch up. So it hits them. I mean, I think this is something, you learn when a lot of your sales are over emails, like catching somebody at the right time of day or the right point in their week can be really important. So waiting for them to be back in office, comfortable, they've gotten through their inbox, and then it hits them. Another thing I do is like, just, I'll take down the email. Sometimes I'll just, hey, can I grab your email, and send an email right there, like, hey, it's Sam, we just met. So then when I follow up, there's already a thread open.
It's warm.
Yeah. And they're like, oh, that was that guy, so there's kind of that touch point there. But totally agree. Like, I can't tell you, probably it's like a 0.5% hit rate or less when I'm handing out business cards. So you got to take ownership and control of the communication.
Yeah. And which is funny, because I feel like I'm not like that. Like, if I take someone's card and I intend to follow up with them, it's never going to get back. It's never going to get by me. Like, business cards are my to-do list. I like the physical cards. Okay, I will follow up with every one of them. But I guess that's because I'm selling.
Yeah, look, and I think that's something you got. I think this theme has come up here a lot with like checking your ego at the door. And like, when I was younger, I read that book. It's such a cringe title, and I avoided reading it for a long time. How to make friends and influence people. I knew it. Yeah. But yeah, you just sort of like, it's always on you. Like, if there's a mistake, take responsibility. Like, just make them feel good, because like the reality is like, that is the power dynamic between sellers and buyers. It's just reality of the game. So yeah, I think expect nothing and take all the responsibility on yourself.
I love it. Samuel, I think for anybody listening, they would have no question why I asked you to come on and give us just this absolute mountain of knowledge about how to crush a distributor show. I think this is going to like live in the ultimate resource library. Man. Like, listen to this and you'll be good to go. I wish I had this when I was going to my first distributor show, or even just considering which one to go to. Is there anything else, just to kind of wrap up here, that you think we didn't touch on enough that you really want to make sure people understand before going into their first show?
Yeah, I think just the last thing is, one of the most important things, which is, what happens after the show. And I think inventory planning can be critical. So if you sell a bunch of product, you got to make sure it's in those DCs and ready to ship. So work with your team and the UNFI team, and, forecasting with your team to make sure you produce that product. And the other thing is, following up and doing what you say you will. So again, like I've said, I've made my share of mistakes. But if you promise something to a buyer, you want to deliver that. And so making sure that, because it gets hectic on the floor, that you have clear notes and that you're recapping and you're following up.
I love it. And I plan to follow up with you many times to do more episodes and just keep digging into all this cool knowledge. I'm such a fan of your guys' product. I love the episode that we did with Jordan Base before on Hop Water, is one of the highest ranking ones that we've had, along with that Expo one that you mentioned, which, just so helpful to give all of this knowledge to emerging brand founders. I only wish someone had been there to give that to you, like the first day that you jumped in, right? And me too. So thank you, Samuel. I really want to thank you and just, really recognize you as, I think, just, one of the true people out there, out there getting stuff done. You're like not like a passive account manager, like you're out there, how to build relationships and go and get accounts and get orders. So it's incredible for us to get to benefit from your skills and knowledge.
Thank you so much, Daniel. This was a ton of fun. I'm still learning, and I appreciate the community you've built for everyone. It's an amazing resource. So keep it up. Thanks so much.
Thank you, man. All right. Bye, everyone.
Cheers.
Oh, no, I forgot to hit record. No, just kidding. I've been waiting like 30 episodes to get somebody with that.
Oh, man.
Only because this was so long. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast today, it would really help us out if you can leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I am Daniel Scharff. I'm the host and founder of Startup CPG. Please feel free to reach out or add me on LinkedIn. If you're a potential sponsor that would like to appear on the podcast, please email partnerships@startupcpg.com. And reminder to all of you out there, we would love to have you join the community. You can sign up at our website, startupcpg.com, to learn about our webinars, events, and Slack channel. If you enjoyed today's music, you can check out my band. It's the Super Fantastics on Spotify Music. On behalf of the entire Startup CPG team, thank you so much for listening and your support. See you next time.